In this lesson, I'm going to cover what was in the pre-algebra book, Glencoe's pre-algebra book, section 2-4, page 85, and this is about multiplying integers. And just to remind you, an integer is any positive or negative number without no fractions, right? So just the 1, 2, 3, 4. So the set would be negative 1, 1, 3, negative 58. These are all integers, no fractions, okay? So to do this, I'm going to start with the most simple multiplication problem I can think of, and that's 1 times 1, okay? Now, we're probably not going to use x in algebra anymore, so let's just get rid of that little x in there. We're going to use a dot, 1 dot 1, or better yet, 1 next to a 1 in parentheses. These all mean the same thing, and of course, this equals 1. Okay, so moving on from there, well, what's 1 times negative 1? Well, it's got to be the opposite of the one we just solved, which, 1 times anything is just the anything. So this is negative 1. Okay, moving on from there. What's negative 1 times negative 1? Well, when I started here, I had two positives, right? And now over here, I made one of them negative. So the answer was negated from the answer I had up here, right? So these are opposites. Now this, I made another one negative. So that's the opposite of this one. So that's just 1. Another way you could look at it is this negative 1 squared is 1, okay? Because if you square a number, no matter what, you're going to get a positive number. And well, okay, let's look at the next possible thing. What's negative 1 times negative 1 times another negative 1? Okay. Now the way I think about this is, well, okay, this has to be the one way you could say this is this has to be opposite of the one we just solved, because I just added another negative onto that, right? And this, of course, so intuitively the answer is going to be negative 1. But how, really? Well, probably the easiest way to look at that is I just go like this. I count up how many negatives do I see? I got 1, 2, 2, and 3. 3 negatives. Well, 2 negatives cancel each other out. So these guys will cancel out, right? This is another way of saying negative 1 times 1 times 1. And that's easy to solve. 1 times 1 is just 1, right? This is just 1. These guys make 1. And this guy's left with negative 1. And negative 1 times 1 is just negative 1. That's another way to look at it. Another way to look at it was, well, I had 3 negative 1s up here. 1, 2, 3, right? So it's negative 1 to the 3rd power. This is probably the best way to look at that. The idea here is if you have 2 negatives, or 4 negatives, or 6 negatives, or 8 negatives, or any even amount of negatives, they're going to cancel each other out. So if I have an odd number of negatives, like this 3 here, the answer is just going to be negative, right? It's going to be negative, then multiplying out the numbers, right? Multiplying out 1 3 times. So I'm going to be left with negative 1. So I guess another way to say this is if I had negative 1 to the, 54th power. Well, the truth is, that's going to be a bunch of negatives, right? It's going to be 2 negatives times another 2 negatives times another 2 negatives. There's always going to be 2 negatives that are canceling each other out, right? So the answer is, of course, just 1. Now, on the other end, what would negative 1 to the 53rd power be? Well, again, there's going to be 2 negatives, 2 negatives, 2 negatives, blah, 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 and they're all going to pair up, but then there's going to be 1 negative left over. So the answer is just going to be negative 1. So let's take an example with some real numbers that aren't using 1, because 1 is the simplest number that there is. Let's try something like negative 5 times 4 times negative 3. Well, first thing I do is I say, well, how many negatives do I have? I got 2 negatives. 2 negatives cancel each other out. So guess what? 5 times 4 is 20. 20 times, oops, no multiplication, no times symbol there. 20.3, or 20 multiplied by 3 is 60. Okay? And it's going to be positive. On the same end, what if I had negative 5, negative 4, negative 3? 3 negatives, well, I have 1, 2, 3 negatives, and then, of course, it's going to be 60. 2 of these negatives cancel each other out, or they become positives, just like in the adding integers, and then I'm left with this negative, negative 60.